Oh, finally managed to get all of the rack stuff unpacked and put into the racks and somewhat organised into, into something that actually makes sense that can start going through. We've got sort of recording equipment, which isn't really of that much interest, although there is that Tascam piece in there. We've got analog effects, more analog effects racks, digital effects racks, and synthesizers, and then some overspill of stuff that didn't fit on the racks, and then just basic utility stuff, which is like, really not of much interest. We've got the Tascam MX 2024 24-track hard disk recorder, and then a couple of Alesis versions of the pretty much the same thing. A whole plethora of Alesis ADAT machines, not particularly interesting. This one's caught my interest though, this Tascam 328. This somehow manages to get 8 tracks onto a normal audio cassette, so I'm interested to see how this one sounds. See if I can zoom out a bit. I can't. But yeah, I'm not sure if it actually puts it onto the tape digitally or not, or if it is actually recording analog tracks onto the tape. So I'm going to test that out. Yeah, whatever. Focusrite audio interface and my old Roland keyboard mixer. So moving on to the analog audio effects, there's a lot of juicy items in this rack. I'm trying to keep the phone as steady as possible. We've got the Roland Chorus Echo SRE 555. This has a really, really nice sound. It's a tape echo, but I think it's also got a spring reverb unit in it as well. And what's really cool about this unit is, although it's meant for being mounted into the rack, what you could do with it is pull it out of the rack in situ while it's still actually racked up. It's not in there super well. And then underneath this panel, you've got access to the tape loop, so you could pull it out the rack and change the tape loop. This is a lovely, lovely machine. The DBX 165A over easy compressor limiter. Quite a legacy device, and the DBX, a much more modern stereo DBX 160S compressor limiter. The Eventide, well, they were called Eventide Clockworks then, Eventide we say in the UK. Instant flanger. I think, no, I'm not sure if that was the Ibanez might have been a rebadged version of that, but I could be wrong. We got the PreSonus Blue Max. Supposedly they're pretty good. That's a dual unit. I haven't tried that out. PreSonus CL44, which is a quad compressor limiter. Aphex Systems Studio Dominator. Aphex Dominator 2. That was a precision multiband peak limiter. The Ibanez analog delay and multi-flanger. Again, that's a pretty sought after bit of a legendary unit. Delta Lab acoustic computer. Not really sure what they are. That maybe that's supposed to be in the digital effects section. What is it? Reverb and delay, I think. Not really sure. Yeah, we've got reverberation. Time-based generator. It's a strange looking one. I haven't tried it out, so I don't really know what it does. Mic Mix Audio Products Master Room Reverberation System. I think this is a spring reverb in this unit. Funky House favourite, the shittest compressor on the planet, perhaps. Well, no, probably beat by this, but this, pretty much every filter disco French house tune ever made heavily relied on that for its ducking. I won't talk about those. Orban stereo synthesizer. I'm not really sure what this is. It looks to be some sort of stereo field, width adjuster. Electro Harmonics vocoder. Haven't tried that unit out yet, so I'm not sure what it was used on, if it's a famous one or not. The Moog 3-band parametric EQs. Again, something I'd never even seen before I picked all this stuff up. I'm looking forward to giving them a little run. Shame there isn't 4 of them. But anyway, yep, 3 of those. Now this I remember using in a friend's studio in the early 2000s, the Focusrite voice box, which is basically a channel strip for vocals. I know it's quite expensive back in the day. I'm not really sure how that fares to stuff these days. A DAF one, which is from a dual analog filter from Vermona. What it says on the tin, basically, it's got LFOs on it. You can control it with CV, but yeah, dual filter. Multi-mode as well, so you've got band pass, parallel, notch, serial, so you can join them both together. Again, I can't really speak much about it because I've never tried one. The Paya, I'm never sure if I say this right or not. Paya. I know they were projects that you'd often build out of magazines and stuff in the 70s and 80s, I believe. Maybe even, I think they're actually still going. You can still buy their kits on their website. Again, don't really know too much about them. I don't even know what that is. I think it's a mic preamp, basically, with tube. Tube microphone preamp, there you go. And then a Paya stereo compressor, an Altec Lansing 1589B mixer amplifier. No idea, really. I believe that these things can be rewired to be mic pre's, but a little quick read up I did on them, but again, I don't really know because I've never seen them before. There's another one on there in the top of that rack. And then these JBL 5101 professional preamplifier. Again, I think they're mic preamps. Yeah, they're mic preamps. Yeah, great. These look interesting. They dual tube compressor limiter. Bellari, I've never heard of them, but on the back they're also labelled as Rolls, ROLLS. Don't really know too much about them. But yeah, one's a dual tube compressor limiter and one is a dual tube mic preamp. This is mostly all analog effects still, by the way. So we got a vintage MXR pitch transposer unit with pitch transposer display add-on. MXR, another MXR pitch transposer. There was a couple of other MXR, but oh, they're up here. There is a MXR delay system 2. I guess that should probably be in the digital rack. And then an MXR digital delay, I think maybe an earlier version up in that rack. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, so sorry I sound really stuffy. What else we got here? Thompson Vocal Eliminator VE1 for records only. I guess this would have been like an early thing for karaoke people to try and basically remove the center channels on recordings. That's what my guess of what it is anyway. Furman Sound. I only know Furman as making power conditioners these days, but perhaps this was a different company. This, when you move the box around, you hear the spring, so that's a spring reverb with a limiter and EQ. Yamaha compressor limiter GC 2020. Not sure if that's an exotic piece or not. I doubt it, being Yamaha. Audio Logic quad noise gate, DBX 150 Type 1 noise reduction system, DBX 160 XT. These are pretty decent units. I used to use these with Ian in the old studio. That was Ian Carey, my old business partner. White Instruments, there's a couple of these. 2 of them have got whacking great big transformers on the back. One of them doesn't. The top one doesn't, so it's maybe not as nice sounding, I'm not sure, but we got they're pretty big EQs. So they are the model 4320s by White Instruments Inc. and the top one is a Series 4000. Audio, this looks nice. It looks lovely, this piece of kit, but haven't really tried it, so I don't know how it sounds. Audio Arts Engineering parametric EQ. It looks pretty decent. Focusrite Twin Track Pro, Platinum Twin Track Pro. This was basically, again, like a channel strip front end before you got into your DAW back in like the mid-2000s. Again, that's another piece that me and Ian used to have in the studio. I love the look of this thing, the Roland Graphic Equalizer SEQ 331. I wish I had two of these as well, because I'd keep them just for the look. I'd sit them on top of the chorus echo. These lovely dual graphic EQs, they are Uri model 535s. I love all the old Uri stuff, which is what became Universal Audio. There was a couple more bits over here that I didn't get anywhere to put. EMU 6400 Ultra. I think it's got some upgrades inside it as well. I might be wrong, but I think that these have got some cards in them that, like Proteus or some of those series. I could be talking out my arse there, but I think he told me that it's got some like some of that series built into it as expansions. Could be wrong. That's my Apollo. Cheetah MS6 is multi-timbral analog synth. It was a pretty cool synth. It comes out of the UK, the Cheetah series. They also used to make, if it's the same company, they used to make all the joysticks and stuff that we'd have with our Spectrums and Commodore 64s when I was a kid. The cool thing about this, with it being multi-timbral, but it's basically like the Oberheim Matrix 6. It uses the same Curtis chips inside it, but unlike the Matrix 6, you could basically have 6 independent mono synths if you wanted, that are playing completely different sounds. So when you were on a budget studio, that was a good thing to have in your arsenal. Aphex Studio Clock. It doesn't actually give out any word clock or anything, so I think that's just sort of like a master MIDI clock there. So moving on, now this rack over here is all the digital stuff. So I'll go from the top down. We've got Alesis Quadraverb GT, we all know what they are, and then the Alesis Quadraverb underneath that, then an Alesis Quadraverb 2, multi-effects units. I've got an Alesis Wedge as well, I just can't find it at the moment. A whole bunch of TC Electronic stuff. So we've got a TC Electronic Finalizer Plus. It's a studio mastering processor. I don't really know how good these are. I know they were absolutely everywhere in like the late 90s and into the 2000s. TC Electronic M1 dual effects processor. M3000 Studio Reverb. I haven't tried this. I'd like to know how it sounds. Another TC Finalizer Plus. I hope I'm holding this phone steady enough for you, because I'm trying to look at the rack and hold the phone at the same time. Yamaha SPX 2000. Again, another multi-effects units. And then the SPX 900, which is also a multi-effect unit. This one looks to be opened up there, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. Digitech RDS 1900 digital delay, not very interesting. Delta Lab Super Timeline, another digital delay. And then another Delta Lab Compu Effectron. This looks to be a sort of a bit of a early multi-effects box. It's like flange, chorus, delay, echo. Obviously with the early ability to create presets and stuff on it. Ubiquitous model H3500. I know this one's fully loaded with everything. Superb DSP unit, and the Insonic underneath it as well. That's actually out of my rack from upstairs, the DP4. That is a really, again, this, like, you'd have the Alesis 3630 and a few other bits, and that was it. You were set for doing funky house. That's all you needed. What we got next? Zoom 9010. Again, that's another, I think that's a 4-channel DSP, multi-effects unit. And then we've got a whole bunch of Roland stuff here. We've got 3 Roland SRV 2000 digital reverbs. We got an SDE 3000 digital delay and an SDE 2500 digital delay. Not too sure what the difference between these two delay units are, because I haven't looked up the specs. I presume one's maybe just like a bit more of an updated version of the other, or I don't know. And then a whole bunch of Lexicon units. So we got the Lexicon MPX1, which is a multiple again, just a multi effects box. That was basically, you could sort of, this, when I've used this, it kind of works a bit like the DP4, where you can sort of change the route of go into, like, you had a pitch changer, chorus, EQ, delay, reverb, and you could sort of change the routing of all the effects. Really geared for guitar, I think, really, the MPX one. LXP 15.2, again, another multi effects machine. LXP 15. We've got three LXP 1s. They were actually really good sounding units, and the LXP5's got a fantastic reverb on it, and they're super cheap, these things. You can pick them up really cheap. And then we got some super classic Lexicon stuff. We've got the PCM 41 delay, the PCM 42 delay, which is, as you can see, the same sort of series as the Model 200 reverb, and this is that's probably my favourite sounding reverb. Same algorithms. Basically, it's a shrunk version of the 224XL, as I remember rightly. I think it used like the same hall and the same plate algorithms, but it was basically shrunk down into a much smaller unit that could go on stage and be moved around a bit easier. But what I prefer, we've had a 224XL and we've had this in the studio. We had these in the studio, and these are just, it's nicer just to use that. Unless you got the larks and all of that stuff. Oh, get up. And finally, moving over to the synths. You can see how long it's taken us to get all this shit screwed into these racks. It's been a nightmare. And we've had to leave a little gap in between each piece so that we can easily remove it. And these are actually server racks. I was looking around for racks to put all this stuff in, and they're like silly money to get like a decent size that we can put a decent amount of stuff in. And these server racks were like $190 off of eBay. So if you need to get cheap racks, and they're freestanding, so you can basically just come around the back of them and have everything patched up. Nice, no nonsense. All right, so synthesizers, what we got in here? We have got the Jomox Airbase 99. That is like a 909 clone, I believe. I'm not sure if it's modeling or all digital, or it might be analog and digital. I don't really know. Oberheim Matrix 1000, Oberheim Matrix 6. A lot of these were already mine, but of course my studio's been turned into Isla's room now, so making way for the new baby. So Korg EXM1. That's basically a rack version of the M1. Korg Wavestation AD, a JD 990, another JD 990, and another JD 990. JV 1080 with a bunch of expansions in it, another 1080, and a 2080, which is my favourite of the series. It's got the same converters as the 1080, so it sounds very similar to the 1080, which is a bit sort of grainy. But it's got a bigger screen, so it's a lot easier to mess around and edit, although there's a really decent controller panel editor for it these days. The Super JX programmer, which the Super JX is the rack version of the big ass keyboard, which this thing is a absolute, weighs a ton, that Super JX. So that my one gathered dust, and I had this rack version, and it's really an arse to use unless you got one of these, and then it's actually absolutely a joy to use. Although saying that, I haven't used it for ages because I haven't made any music, but it is nice. Yeah, MKS 70. Roland D550, so that's a rack version of the Roland D50. And a pair of Akai S950s. And then onto the second rack that's all synths up here. We've got Metasonics. Now, I can't wait to have a play with this thing. I believe there's only 7 or 8 of these in existence, and this is number 6. And this is, if you look behind this, it's a mono synth, like vacuum tube synthesizer. And I don't think you'll be able to see through the window. You might be able to if I let it focus in a bit. But if you look at the filaments inside that, it's a Nixie tube, I believe. So that comes up with numbers. But yeah, I'm going to do a little video as soon as I can with this. I can't wait to set it up. You know how difficult it's been for me with all this gear here. Like, there's been a couple of pieces that I had to find out if they worked or not. But beyond that, there's all this stuff that I'm just dying to plug in and fuck around with. But I haven't got the time. But yeah, super, super rare vacuum tube synthesizer called the Fatty Drum by Metasonics. It's MIDI as well, which is pretty cool. Then we've got the Vermona DRM, which is an analog drum synth. The Yamaha FS1R, which I think that one's sort of been dubbed as like, well, up until like their new Mod X type stuff. This was sort of like the flagship FM, I think, and format synthesis. My old TX81Z, I had that just for the bass patch. I can't remember what the bass patch is called, but again, if you make house music, like 90s inspired house, you have to have that bass patch. I can't remember what it's called right now. Vintage key, there's a bunch of these EMU modules. Vintage keys, Morpheus Z-plane synthesizer. You got me, Americans have got me saying Z now. I would say Z-plane, but whatever. That's supposed to be really interesting. I guess this is the forerunner to Dave Rossum's Z-plane filter Eurorack module that he designed and builds. I haven't tried it out, so I don't really know. But EMU Proteus 2000, EMU Orbit, EMU Procussion, EMU Audity 2000. Excuse me. Then we move on. Ensoniq ESQM, which is obviously the rack version of the. Is it SQ? Is it ESQ or SQ80? Can't remember. That's another one of my old units. It's a good synth. My personal favourite synth out of most of my synths, or maybe I should say digital synth, although it's a bit of a hybrid, the Korg EX8000, which I've got two of these. That's the rack version of the Korg DW8000, which uses digital waves or wavetables, but it pushes them through analog filters and analog VCAs, and you can make the thing sound so lush. Plagued by it's pretty easy, but not particularly enjoyable method of programming. But again, a few years ago, this was released, and this is an external programmer for the DW8000 or the EX8000. And what's cool about it is it can control up to, I think, 3, maybe 4 at the same time. But everything on the synth is obviously all broken out to the faders. So it makes an EX8000 or a DW8000 or a DW6000 really, really fun to use. And that loads of people sleep on that synth. I don't think they realise the potential of what the synth can do. It makes some really, really lush sounds. These sound expansions, these Roland units, bass and drums and dance, are essentially the little expansion cards that you would get in the JV 1080 and the 2080 series. They're those ROM chips that would be on them expansion cards plunked into a little 1U rack box. They're actually pretty funky, but if not a bit, not needed these days. I think you can even get all this stuff in the Roland Cloud stuff as well. PV Spectrum organ, great, whatever. The Freebase, made by Freeform Analog Technologies. I think this is like a 303 clone. I haven't tried it. Touched by Sound, Clap Cushion, Analog Clap Synthesizer. Mini Syncussion percussion synthesizer, which just sort of, that's obviously for claps, and this one you can do all like your sort of syntoms and pew, all that kind of stuff. I believe this one is pretty heavily expanded, got the sampling option and everything. It's a Kurzweil K2000R. That was the keyboard version of that was a real good keyboard back in the day. It still holds up. A friend of mine uses it all the time, and the pianos in it still sound amazing. MKS Planet 30, MKS 30 Planet S. That is a JX3P, I think, in Iraq, pretty much. Uses the same voice chips as the Juno 106 and that. So yeah, didn't we do well racking all this stuff up? It's taken a while, and it's made a bit more space. Actually got a little bit of floor space, and next week the mezzanine floor will be arriving, which is going to be a 15-foot by 12-foot platform with some stairs that fold down off the top of it, so I can finally get these synths off the ground and sort of stored a bit nicer. Started sorting out the shelves a bit more. What we got here, a pair of micro Moogs, a pair of multi Moogs, really nice ARP Odyssey with some sponge on top of it because it's got a 909 sat on there, an 808. We've got Oberheim DSX, Oberheim DMX with factory MIDI. I'm not sure they came with factory MIDI until the end. I don't really know. A pair of Oberheim Promers, and what's that there? A Oberheim DX and another ARP Odyssey. So yeah, now this is all sort of sorted out and got some coherence to it. I can start going through it all and getting stuff listed on the site. Yeah, there you go. See you then.